Zogby Analytics has a new survey out about Americans' perceptions of Arab Americans and Muslim Americans. Now remember, those are Americans. An Arab American is not 50% American, he's not 94% American, he's 100% American. Unfortunately, fellow Americans don't often see him that way. Favorability towards Arab Americans is at 36%. It's down from 2010 when it was at 43%. Now let's think about how absurd this question is and how depressing the result is. What if you asked it about any other dash Americans? If you said, okay, what's the popularity of African Americans? What do you mean, what's their popularity? What do you mean, what's their approval rating? What, I disapprove of blacks? What does that mean, right? I disapprove of Venezuelan Americans. I disapprove of Jewish Americans. Could you even ask that question? No, right? And now, here, I'm not blaming the people who asked the question because it leads to an interesting fact, right? And an approval rating of Arab Americans is only 36%. Okay, how about Muslim Americans? So, well, of course, that's even lower, 27%, and down from 36% in 2010. Okay, now, you might disapprove of them, whatever the hell that means, right? But how about your actions? Well, do you think that they should be discriminated against? Unfortunately, a large percentage of Americans said, oh yeah, of course. 42% of Americans believe law enforcement is justified in using profiling tactics against Muslim Americans and Arab Americans. Once again, those two groups would happen to be 100% American, but apparently no, they don't get 100% of the rights. Just on their ethnicity, their race, their religion, they should be discriminated against and profiled. Now, of course, you fill in any other ethnicity or religion there, and people wouldn't stand for it. If we said, no, I think President Obama should profile Christian Americans because they do most of the domestic terrorism in this country, and actually domestic terrorism here by radical Christians is far worse than it is from Muslims. In fact, there's a report about that today in the news. Of course, every right-winger in the country would have their heads, how is Obama discriminating against Christians? It's un-American, how could you? Discriminating against Muslims, of course you should, right? How about Democrats? They're theoretically more progressive, right? And they are. It turns out they are more progressive, but still the numbers are not encouraging. Among Democrats, Arab Americans have a 30% unfavorable rating. Okay, so much better than the overall average, but 30% of even Democrats say, no, I find Arabs unfavorable. Muslim Americans are 33% unfavorable. Among Republicans, Arab Americans are 54% unfavorable. Muslim Americans are 63% unfavorable. Let's pause here to talk about how stupid Muslim Americans who vote for Republicans are. Now, obviously, I'm not thrilled with the Democratic numbers, but if you're a Muslim American and you're voting for a party, 63% of whom think that you are unfavorable, by your very existence, you are unfavorable. You ought to have your head examined. You put those guys in charge, what do you think the policies are going to be? You think they're going to be in favor of you and your family? People who, by the way, 9 out of 10 times came to this country because they were running from Muslim fundamentalism. Now, maybe 9 out of 10 is an overstatement because a lot of Muslims are born here in the U.S. and are third generation, fourth generation, and a lot of them are African Americans as well. But a lot of those people who came, for example, ran from Iran, ran from Iraq, and found shelter here because they believe in the idea of a secular country, a free country, a country of hope and opportunity. And then they come here and then you go, oh, you. The cops should follow you around. I find you unfavorable. Republicans were more likely to think that Arab Americans and Muslim Americans unable to hold a role in government without being influenced by ethnicity or religion. I mean, how is that for ironic? We don't like your religion so much, we think you would be influenced unduly by your religious views. No, you're unduly influenced by your religious and racial views, not them, okay? Okay, and then if you're pretty despondent over this, don't worry, because the last part of the Pew poll really cracked me up. A Pew poll this month found that Muslims were perceived as negatively as atheists. Wow, you've really hit rock bottom when you're down there with the atheists. Founding fathers were geniuses. They said we should not establish a religion. They put it in the Constitution, and they said that we were all supposed to be judged the same. After all these years, we still refuse to listen to them.